Hello, you are listening to an archived worship service of First Presbyterian Church, Columbus, Mississippi. Thank you for listening.
Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to Jesus. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them. They were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my Son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent. In those days told no one any of the things that they had seen. On the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met them. Just then a man from the crowd shouted, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He is my only child." And suddenly a spirit seized him, and all at once he shrieks. It convulses him until he foams at the mouth. It mauls him and will scarcely leave him. I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. Jesus answered, "You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer will I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon dashed him to the ground in convulsions. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And all were astonished at the greatness of God. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So reading this passage this last week left me with one question that I could not shake. Why is Jesus so upset? That ending of our little small scope of Luke's gospel today, that ending, that response feels overboard. It feels frustrated and honestly kind of mean. So what's going on here? Why is Jesus so upset? A man approaches Jesus for help. His son, his only child, is shrieking and convulsing to death. Now, isn't that a time? Isn't that a place? Isn't that the moment that is appropriate to beg of Jesus? But Jesus' response would feel more appropriate if the man had a splinter in his finger. Or if he came to Jesus just to test him, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Or what if the man just came to Jesus with a business venture, turning water into wine? But this man comes with his child to beg of Jesus, "Please help. Nothing else is helping." sick child, covered in his Father's love and faith that Jesus was the only hope. Now, isn't this a very strange text? Isn't this a very strange way to react? Jesus responds with a verbal eye roll. Now, we don't know if Jesus calls the man or the crowd or the disciples or everyone all together the faithless and the perverse. But we get the point by the time he exclaims, "How much longer do I have to put up with all of you?" Now, I must admit, this is not the Jesus I like to ponder on. This is not the snapshot that I think of when I look to comfort in my faith. This Jesus is similar to the one who talks back to his mother, the one that refers to the Syrophoenician woman as a dog sniffing around the table for scraps. So where is the Jesus who feeds the hungry? Where is the Jesus that says, "Let the little children come to me"? Where is Zacchaeus, you come down, Jesus? I have an idea, but it's going to take just a minute to get there. Some of you know I've started working with a group over at Mississippi State to form a campus ministry, UKirk, University Church, UKirk. We have a group here at MUW that's going wonderfully with Heather's guidance and directorship. We have an incredible UKirk ministry at Ole Miss that's just scores and scores of college students coming every time. But we have a great group at State of about 15 young people, including two of our own. Mark Porter and Jamie Dornan are always there, and it's great to have this group meeting together and starting the framework that will begin a new campus ministry at State. I've listened closely a few weeks ago as we met for the first time since Christmas break. Several of them shared stories of their time at home, their time with their parents, their time with their friends, and several of them shared the difficult parts of going home again. The differences that they saw, how they had grown, the differences between them and their friends now who are in other places and other parts of their lives, the friction they experienced with their parents due to the changes of adulthood and freedom and the assumptions that come along with that. The consensus was that going home was not easy. It brought with it challenges that they were not expecting. I identified with this. I remembered those days, but I remember them a little differently. For me, it happened a couple years earlier. You see, I worked at our Presbyterian's Camp Hopewell in Oxford, the summer that I turned 16. I spent 10 weeks away from family and from friends, and this was in a time before social media and cell phones, so it truly was a time apart. 10 weeks at age 16. And it is in that time that I changed. I was given a great responsibility of other people's children, keeping them alive, making sure they brush their teeth, at least sometimes, hoping they went to sleep at night and put on clean underwear. I had a job to do. But it was in this time, over this summer, that I began to change. I went from being a very introverted, quiet mouse to the very first time being able to speak up. I came home an extrovert. Now, my parents had no idea what to do with that. They were not prepared. My friends had no idea what to do with that. They were not prepared. And finally, I was not prepared with the lack of interest people showed in wanting to hear all of my stories about camp, and especially about all of my camp friends. I felt like my welcome home was only a welcome back to the way things had been. Get back to normal. I felt unwelcome to change. or share or grow. The college students of UKirk echoed that feeling, a feeling that they didn't really feel welcome going home. Luke says Jesus needs to pray. He needs time away. A time after declaring to the disciples that they were heading for Jerusalem. And so he invites his inner circle to join him on the mountaintop. That day, he invites James and John and Peter. And although they are invited to this significant moment on the hilltop as time of prayer, all they want to do is take a nap. It is in the midst of this prayer that this mountaintop experience takes place. An overshadowing cloud, a transcendence, a transformation in appearance, and the law of Moses, the prophet Elijah. The moment is full of awe and amazement. And finally, we're told that the conversation was about Jerusalem, about departure. And it's at this moment, it is right here that we need to pause. We need to linger for just a moment. The conversation was about Jerusalem departure. Now, you have heard of euphemisms before, but to call the cross departure is to minimize it. I've had several experiences in my life that go under the heading, the category of mountaintop. And many of you have as well. Moments of clarity, moments of change, moments of focus and energy, almost every one of them positive in every category of life. Excitement and courage go with most of those moments for me. But none of those mountaintop experiences focused on departure, death. Now, what if we have put something into this story over the years that is not really there? Hang on. When I read the story year after year after year of this moment that we find in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we always tell it with this awe sense that things are changing, this mountaintop experience for Jesus that must be felt in very similar ways to we experience mountaintop experiences. A positive, good, change, courage, freedom, clarity. This moment that is so full of awe that Peter just babbles and babbles about stuff that he doesn't know what he's talking about. The story says, oh, let's build some huts, a little house for you to stay in. He doesn't know what he's even saying because he's so full of awe and it's so good, right? Maybe it's not. Maybe we've projected something of our own experience onto Scripture that is not really there. This moment of clarity, this moment of change, this moment of focus and energy, what if it's not a positive experience, but for Jesus it is a devastating one? The clues are there for us to see. Who is with Jesus? Moses. Moses, the guy that saw the burning bush and told God, you've got the wrong guy, pick somebody else. Who else is there? Elijah, the guy who runs for his life, depressed that all of his friends are dead, and that he is a complete failure in ministry, and he told God, just leave me alone, just let me die. Those are the people who are there. And we think this is a good moment? Even the voice of God reminds us of an earlier moment in Jesus' life where he balks. Seven chapters earlier, we hear this echoed refrain. Mary tells the servants, do what he instructs. God says, listen to him. Jesus' response to Mary, woman, it is not my time. Or what if the prayer at Transfiguration is much more like the prayer at Bethany? With his friends asleep, he weeps blood for the hour that is upon him. This is the last Epiphany before Lent. This is the last hilltop unveiling before the cross. The valley below is not green and lush and full of comforts, but a world in utter distress, chaos, and hurt. A world where the shadow of the cross extends out of sight. And worst of all, the disciples, the ones that he asked to come with him to share this moment, they act like it didn't even happen. They remain silent. They say nothing, wanting the world to stay the same. This is burdened Jesus. Jesus is burdened because he knows differently. He knows the truth that has been revealed. There will be pain, there will be suffering, and there will be horrible death, not departure. Summed up pleasantly for us here in this text, Jesus sees it plainly. And there's no one else on all the earth that understands what this means. The world is about to change, and the world just wants to stay the same. The final Epiphany is being unveiled. And Jesus says, how much longer do I have to do this? How much longer must I bear this? And does it sound a little different now? I think I understand a little better. I think I'm starting to get it. Reread Luke. When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent. Jesus is already bearing the weight as he comes down the mountain. Jesus is not mad at the Father or the disciples, but he feels the frustration and the burden of Epiphany. When God is revealed, when people change, there is always conflict, anxiety, and even unwelcome. The world is not the same for Jesus, but he's the only one who gets it. The boy's father is terrified, panicked almost without hope for his son's life. And Jesus internalizes that and multiplies that, the state of that father, by millions and billions who will mourn without hope, who will continue without hope, without the cross and the resurrection. The fear and the hurt of the father panicked for his only son. And then Jesus rebukes the unclean spirit. He heals the boy and gives him back to his father. And all were astounded at the greatness of God. And thus begins our journey of Lent. So we have a decision to make at the final Epiphany. Will we let Christ go alone? Will we keep silent? Will we pretend that the world has not changed? Or are we ready to face what must be faced? Are we ready to pick up our cross, bearing the full weight of God's epiphany? Friends, the world is about to change through Christ Jesus. let us be ready to change as well.